Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. As I mentioned last week, the only podcast, I know this for a fact, that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm going to keep going with that casino reference for as long as I can because I really enjoy that movie, and I think more people need to know about it. And I don't think it gets its credit in terms of where it's ranked in the pantheon of mob movies. But that's not the focus of tonight's episode. Tonight's episode, as titled, Playoff Push, Buffalo Bills versus Atlanta Falcons preview with Aaron Freeman. I hope you guys put it together. We're going to do a little Bills Falcons preview tonight. We're going to be talking matchups. We're going to be talking tendencies, some personnel in terms of this game for the Bills and Falcons, because despite how big that Patriots victory was this past Sunday, and despite the Buffalo Bills being in first place in the AFC East, this regular season is far from over. The Bills need to do their job this upcoming Sunday against the Falcons and beat the Falcons in Buffalo. And then they need to do their job again the following week against the Jets, lock this thing up, go into the playoffs as hot as possible with that momentum, with first place in the AFC East, host a playoff game. So they can't let up. And the Falcons are a very interesting and intriguing team, and one that I've had a decent amount of fantasy shares of this year, so I've watched a decent amount of Falcons football, and they've just perplexed me at every corner. So I am very excited to have such a knowledgeable person on tonight's show to talk about those Atlanta Falcons. And as I mentioned in the title of this episode, and without further ado, let's welcome to the show Mr. Aaron Freeman, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast and writer for The Falcoholic, and knowledgeable on all things Atlanta Falcons, which I'm assuming on some years is a good thing, and this year maybe not so much.
Look, I am equally perplexed by the Falcons on a weekly and daily basis, as I am forced and compelled and obligated to talk about them every day on the Locked On Falcons podcast. So I'm in a similar boat with you.
I don't get it. They're and it leads us into our first topic here, the state of the Falcons and who and what they are coming into this game. I feel like if you asked 100 people who watch football but don't follow the Falcons, if you ask them what they think the Falcons record was, I don't think a lot of people would even come close to saying they were around 500. I think most people would think they were several games below. And they come into this game statistically 7-8. They're only one game out of a playoff spot. They've had some really brutal losses, but then they've had some losses where they've played well. They've tied some things together. They come into this game 7-8, but it's been such a weird year. Matt Ryan has looked really deficient at times. Calvin Ridley steps away from the game, but then Cordero Patterson's having this amazing year, and there's all this up and down. So I guess let's just start with that. The state of the Falcons coming into this game, who or what are they as they head into this game against the Bills?
Yeah, I mean, they've been a team. Basically, the story of the Falcons season is they are a team that looks good against bad teams and looks bad against good teams. They're 7 wins outside of the 2 that they've gotten in the division. The other 5 wins against Jacksonville and the Giants and the Jets and the Dolphins. And I know the Dolphins have turned their season around, but at the point when the Falcons played them, they were a struggling football team. And I'm blanking on whoever else the Falcons, Jackson. I said that.
Hey,
but
man,
whoever
wins against Jacksonville aren't the easiest thing to come by. So, that counts for you.
That is true. So, they've been a team that has won a lot of close games. They're 7-2 in one-score ball games. Okay. Those wins have primarily come against the lower tier teams that they face on their schedule. They have the easiest record, or the easiest schedule, based off of 2021 records this season so far. And so they're a team that looks solid against bad teams, but once they face good teams, they tend to not show up for the most part this year. So it's been perplexing. And I'm curious to see if the Falcons can kind of shake that MO, that sort of expectation this week against the Bills. This is really their last opportunity to really shake that, because they obviously close out the season against another divisional opponent, the Saints, who they've already beaten this year, and the Saints are going through their own issues at this point in time. So even if the Falcons win that game, people will say, well, it's a divisional game. The Saints are down. They're dealing with a lot of injuries and all these various things. They already beat that team. That's not that impressive a win. The only thing that the Falcon fans are looking forward to that Week 18 game is basically, hopefully, they're hoping that it seals the Saints' fates and knocks them out of the postseason, whatever the case may be. That will be a great way to wrap up this first year under Arthur Smith to sweep the Saints. But I think against this Bills team, we'll see if they can kind of shake that, as I said, that reputation of not showing up against good teams, particularly going up against a Bills team that they don't have a lot of matchups that favor them
Mm.
in this regard. And so, when we talk about the state of the Falcons, they're technically still in the playoff hunt. They have to win out, and they have to get some help from other teams losing out this season. I'm not holding my breath that that's going to be the case, because obviously they have to first climb this Buffalo Bill size mountain this weekend. And we'll just sort of see if they can do that. But, it's just going to be tough to see if this team can kind of shake what I'm talking about with that reputation of not showing up against good teams.
They've been, we each said perplexing several times, and their ability to show up against big teams. How much of that, we're going to dive into the offense first here and talk about several players and some scheme and structure stuff. But let's start at the top of it. How much of this falls onto Matt Ryan in terms of the struggles for this Falcons offense? Like, I feel like he's always been a very polarizing player, even when he was killing it and doing really great with Julio in that offense. I feel like he never really got the respect he deserved. And then when they lost in the Super Bowl, I felt like there were so many people who came out and were like, see, that's what we're always talking about with Matt Ryan. He's been such a polarizing player amongst fans. And with the struggles that the Falcons have this year, how much of, especially offensively, how much of those struggles lay at the feet of Matt Ryan?
I don't want to be too harsh on Matt Ryan. I've been critical of Matt Ryan when I don't think he's played well this season,
Okay.
but I don't necessarily know if the struggles of the Falcons offense are necessarily on him. I would say probably the biggest factor for Matt Ryan, and the biggest reason why he is underwhelmed this season, is he misses Julio Jones. That having Julio Jones, and everybody is aware of what Julio Jones brings to any offense in the field when healthy. Obviously, that has been an issue the last couple of seasons, but in terms of what he brings to the field, but really for Matt Ryan, and this was the case when previous regimes, where they would bring in a new offensive coordinator, Matt Ryan, kind of adapting to that new system would take the better part of a year to sort of get his feet under him. And we saw that in 2015 with Kyle Shanahan. We saw it in 2017 with Steve Sarkisian, then again in 2019 with Dirk Cutter. And he always, in those situations, being a little bit uncomfortable with the play calling and the system and all this various stuff, could always look to Julio Jones and say, look, I don't know what this play call is asking me to do. I don't know exactly what my progressions are going to be, but my first read is going to be Julio Jones.
Yeah, my read is Julio.
I'm going to throw the ball to Julio Jones. And I often joke, like, on the rare times where Matt Ryan is not in the lineup, where someone like a Matt Schaub steps into the game, he's like, I'm throwing the ball to Julio Jones.
Yeah.
I don't care what the coverage says. I'm throwing the ball to Julio Jones. And that's what any normal human being would do in that situation, particularly behind the bad Falcons offensive line, where you don't have all that much time to throw, and you got to get the ball out quickly and throw the ball to Julio Jones. And not having that reliable playmaker in the offense, with Calvin Ridley out of the lineup, and Kyle Pitts, who has been great this season, but hasn't been that level of great, and nor should you expect a rookie, particularly at the tight end position, to come in and play at the level of, basically, in my humble opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the 5 best wide receivers of all time, in Julio Jones. I'm sure other people may disagree with that opinion, but one of the best wide receivers certainly over the last decade in the NFL. And so I think that's really hurt Matt Ryan in a lot of ways, of not having that reliable playmaker, that even when he was going through some of these ups and downs in the first year under a play caller, there was always the old reliable and Julio Jones out there on the field to sort of help him get through that. And he doesn't have that. And hopefully, as his rapport with Kyle Pitts grows, and if and when Calvin really comes back next season, you will start to see all these things start to mesh for Matt Ryan, his offense. And my expectation going in the next season is that he's going to have a big year. But I think, as far as the Falcons offense this season, I don't think it necessarily falls at Matt Ryan's feet. They have a bad offensive line that can't really protect him. That's a big part of his struggles. The not having that sort of go-to weapon at the wide receiver position, is certainly hurting their things, and they have not been an effective run team. They've done a better job over the last month than they did earlier in the season, but they were like the worst or second the worst run offense in the league for basically the first 3 months of the season. So it's one of those things where there's not a whole lot of support around Matt Ryan to allow him to play his best football. But at the same time, like, there are certain elements that Matt Ryan could do a better job with on an individual level. But, I think when I look at this Falcons offense, I think they want to be this sort of physical, run first, balanced offense, similar to what Arthur Smith had in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And they just don't necessarily have the offensive line or the running game to really be that type of team. And Arthur Smith's offense, despite its success in Tennessee, isn't really geared to be this sort of high-flying drop-back passing attack that Matt Ryan has shown himself to be very comfortable operating. But without a player like Julio Jones, without a player like Calvin Ridley, that's not really what the Falcons are built to be. So I think a lot of their issues, it's a variety of issues, but I would probably blame the offensive line first, maybe blame the play calling next, as to why the Falcons offense hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype.
You mentioned the offensive line. I want to stick with that quickly because the Bills have had offensive line woes and issues throughout this year. Staying with that Falcons offensive line in terms of their play, overall deficient in both pass protection and run blocking, or do you see one is worse than the other? Is it holistically bad, or are there just several weak spots up front? Let's dive into that O-line a little bit and, talk about just how much of a weakness they are for this Falcons team.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, over the last month, their running has been better.
Yep.
So it feels like the run blocking isn't nearly as bad as it was earlier in the season, where it seemed like outside of right guard Chris Lindstrom, nobody was really an effective run blocker for this team. And that led to some of their struggles early on the season running the football. As far as our offensive line goes, Chris Lindstrom has been, arguably one of the best guards in the league this season. He hasn't played great over this last month. He dealt with a personal tragedy with his mother passing away a couple of weeks ago. So maybe that's a factor that's limited his performance in recent weeks. And the fact that he's gutting through that is a testament to his toughness and mental fortitude. And so we're not going to be too judgmental on if, he gives up a couple of pressures every now and then, but he was playing outstanding at a Pro Bowl level for most of the season. In the last couple of weeks, taking a step back a little bit. And that's been problematic because basically the Falcons have two good pass protectors on the team, Lindstrom and Jake Matthews, and the other three guys, and center Matt Hennessy and left guard Jalen Mayfield and right tackle Caleb McGarry are very up and down. They're not consistently, or Mayfield's been consistently bad, but the other two guys have not necessarily been consistently bad. They just tend to be very inconsistent. One week they're really good, and next week they're pretty bad. And then when you have a player like Lindstrom take a step back, then you're probably relying a little bit too much on the whims of those guys and them having good weeks. And I think it's going to be a tough matchup for them going up against this Bills front. They don't get a ton of sacks, but they get a lot of pressure. And those types of units still give this Falcon team a lot of problems. And Ed Oliver going up against Jalen Mayfield, who's been one of the weaker guards in the NFL this season, is not a great matchup. That's something that you can exploit. Mario Addison historically has had good games against Jake Matthews going back to his days in Carolina. The last time the Falcons faced the Bills, Jerry Hughes had a really good week, but he'll be going up against Caleb McGarry primarily, given that he lines up against that right tackle for the most part. And that's a favorable matchup for him because Caleb McGarry tends to struggle against guys that can utilize their speed. And I know Jerry Hughes is not as explosive as he once was, but he still has more than enough juice to get around Caleb McGarry and more than enough veteran savvy and technique and whatnot to beat him. And McGarry really struggled against Nick Bosa a couple of weeks ago, who was able to utilize the array of different ways of getting past him. So it's a problem for this Falcon team. And obviously, Bills fans know that the Bills have a deep rotation of guys. And so I'm not really expecting this Falcons pass protection, if they have to get into a straight drop back passing game, to really hold up against this Bills pass rush. And so I think they're going to have to rely on, hopefully this is going to be a week where the run blocking is there, the play action is there, and that will prevent the Bills from being able to pin their ears back, where I think they have several advantageous matchups along the line of scrimmage. And hopefully the Falcons offensive line can step up this week, but they haven't consistently done that this season.
I'm very interested to see how that matchup goes, especially with, how you mentioned Arthur Smith coming over from Tennessee and what kind of offense he wants to run. And then looking at things for Atlanta, they have the number one zone run usage rate in the NFL at 85%. And the Bills, when they've struggled this year against the run, it's been largely against teams that have run more gap against them. So I want to see how they're able to hold up against a line that hasn't succeeded too much, but kind of knowing what they want to do and how that matches up against the Bills. And you hit on it with this Atlanta offense. I was I was actually not shocked, but I'm a big believer in DVOA and how it measures a team's efficiency by comparing success on every single play to a league average based on situation and opponent. I love it. And the Falcons coming into this game offensively, they are 28th in offensive DVOA, 24th in passing, 31st in rushing. Just numbers aren't great. Their stuff percentage, so the amount of runs that are met at or behind the line of scrimmage, they're 25th. They've had 19% of their runs met at or behind the line of scrimmage. And then this is a big one. They're last in power success, which measures on third and fourth down, 2 yards or less to go, how often you convert. They're only at 47%, which is last in the league. But some of the things on this offensive side are nice. You got some shiny toys. You got Kyle Pitts. You got Cordero Patterson. Let's talk about Pitts first, because I love what you mentioned. I feel like when he got drafted, despite the fact that it's hard for rookie tight ends to break through right away as a rookie, a lot of people just thought Kyle Pitts was the one to break out. He destroys every mold because he is so phenomenal. But you mentioned, the type of year that he's had, and it is tough for a rookie, and he's building that rapport. But coming into this game, 64 catches, 949 yards, 1 touchdown, 17 yards per catch. His usage is so fun to see. 44.4% of his snaps have come in the slot, 33.7% out wide, 21.7 lined up as an inline tight end. His average depth of target is 11.4 yards. He's had a good rookie campaign, not stellar and immaculate like I feel like a lot of people wanted it to be or needed it to be. But let's talk about Kyle Pitts. How has he played this year? How impressed with him are you? And what do you think the future holds for him?
He's played well, and I've been very impressed with him. You talk about, it's all about expectations, right? Expectations were that he was going to come in and be this dominant player, and he has been that at times. Expectations were, I know from me myself, I projected him to have double-digit touchdowns this year, and the fact that he only has one is certainly a disappointment.
I feel like he's taken Julio's role in that regard, which just seems like the number one dude just does not catch touchdowns with this offense.
Yeah, it seems ironic because that was one of the things, at least, bitter Falcon fans were, oh, Julio doesn't score touchdowns and Kyle Pitts is going to be dominant. And it's like, nope, basically the same thing. And like, I think, specifically on that red zone issue, I feel like the Falcons haven't really utilized the Kyle Pitts because basically they just kind of just draw up lobs to him. And basically if they're not doing a lob play to him, and that's never been a strength of Matt Ryan's game, they don't really design that much for him in the red zone. So I think that's a contributing factor to why he hasn't scored. So that's something they'll have to figure out in the future. But I think Kyle Pitts has been outstanding. He's had a historic rookie season for a tight end. He's 51 yards away from surpassing 1,000 yards, which is something a rookie tight end has not done since 1961 when Mike Ditka did it. And, I look at what he has done, given the expectations were so high that he was going to instantly come in and basically, I guess, be like this, 100 catch, 1,300 yard, 10 touchdown guy to fill the shoes of Julio Jones. People are kind of disappointed with what he's done, but I will admit that there's been plenty of times on Locked On Falcons where we have talked about what Kyle Pitts isn't versus what he is. But he has been, when we sort of really recontextualize it, making the Pro Bowl, having 100+ yard game this past week, surpassing Jeremy Shockey, who was second on that list behind Mike Ditka from 19 years ago in terms of yardage for a rookie tight end. When we recontextualize these things, there's no doubt about it. Objectively, Kyle Pitts has had an outstanding year, has been a virtual highlight reel, had a great one-handed grab last week against Detroit. He's had several of those going back earlier this season. Certainly, we could be critical of how he's utilized in the red zone. Certainly, we could be critical and say, hey, it feels like there's still a lot of yards and catches left on the field. It feels like instead of having some of these games where Kyle Pitts has 5 or 6 catches, there's an opportunity for him to have 9, 10 or more catches if the Falcons, utilize him in certain ways. So I think all of that stuff is fair, but I think overall, when we look at Kyle Pitts' rookie season and rookie campaign, he's been outstanding this year. And I think he has a very bright future in this league.
That's awesome to hear. He was such a fun prospect at Florida, and then he gets taken into this Atlanta offense. And I love your point on the expectation. I feel like that's something we talk about every week. It feels like here in regards to Tremaine Edmonds. When the Bills took him, it felt like everybody was like, oh my God, middle linebacker taken by Sean McDermott. Next, Luke Kuechly. He's only 19 years old. He's huge. He's fast. He should be amazing. Those expectations versus reality can really be the difference in terms of how fans and analysts feel about a player. So spot on. Love that. Another shiny piece on this offense, Cordero Patterson. So happy for him after, I remember when he was drafted out of Tennessee and he never really became what people thought he could based on the talent. He's jumped around and he's shown flashes here and there, and he's just exploded this year for the Falcons. 140 carries, 579 yards, 6 touchdowns, 49 catches, 523 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. He has 260 snaps out of the backfield, 58 snaps in the slot, 93 snaps lined up out wide, 15 snaps as an inline tight end, and then 56 snaps as a kick returner. Legitimately Mr. Do-It-All, explosive, powerful. Stephon Diggs came out today and said that Cordero Patterson is the most impressive guy he's ever seen with the ball in his hands, even ahead of Adrian Peterson. Patterson was asked about that today, and he said that Diggs was just kind of blowing smoke about that, but he thanked him for it. Really awesome year for Cordero Patterson. Also a really good person and a human being as well. Talk about Cordero Patterson. How has he been unlocked in this Falcons offense and just how versatile he can be?
Yeah, and you know those touchdowns. Maybe the reason why Kyle Pitts doesn't have as many touchdowns because Cordero Patterson gets all of them. We call him Scordero Patterson down in Atlanta.
Dude, that's good.
Given how much he scores,
I like that.
So it's one of those things where Patterson has been a revelation this year. I've been critical of some of the things that Arthur Smith has done this season, but how he's utilized Patterson has not been one of them. And it's not as if Arthur Smith is doing particularly creative ways of getting in the ball. You're not a couple of weeks ago when the Falcons were facing the 49ers and we were sort of comparing him and Deebo Samuel to each other. And it was like, well, Kyle Shanahan does a lot more creative things to find ways to get Deebo Samuel the ball. And a lot of what the Falcons do with Patterson is just like simple stuff, run the football, those outside zone runs that you already alluded to. When they need a check down, they often throw it to him, right? And because of what Stephon Diggs is saying, and I don't think I would doubt Stephon Diggs was telling the truth based off of how Cordero Patterson has played this year and how dominant he has been after the catch, that he can turn some of these 6-yard checkdowns into 20-yard gains. He's done that on a regular basis. Screen passes, hitch routes, these sort of things. When he lines up in the slot, they just basically ask him to run 4 yards down the field, turn around, catch the ball.
His average depth of target is literally 4.5 yards. So you're spot on.
Yeah. And then when you're seeing him split out wide, you're seeing opportunities for him to make plays down the field. There's been fades. There's been a couple of post routes that he's made a number of those plays this season. And so really the secret to unlocking Cordero Patterson was getting him the ball. That's basically what it has been.
Using him.
Just give him the ball a lot more and let him cook, basically. And it's worked for them this season. And I think that's going to be a big part of their game plan this weekend. Hopefully that they can get him going in the run game, because, I don't think they're really built to be a team at this point in time to, win a shootout against this Bills offense. And so I think, Patterson making plays is going to be a huge part if this team is going to have some success, particularly on the ground.
Real quick, Patterson has been a name that Bills fans have talked about as a potential free agent target this upcoming year. Do you see the Falcons trying to retain him and bringing him back, or do you think it's going to be a one and done for him in Atlanta?
I think it's going to be a priority move for the Falcons to try to bring him back.
Okay.
Whether or not the Falcons will be able to do so, I'm not convinced of that. I think the issue is going to be, what is Patterson's market value going to be given the type of season that he's had? But his ideal role, even as good as he has been, is kind of more as an RB2 than necessarily an RB1. But because of how productive he has been, maybe someone will come along and say, look, let's pay him like an RB1 and pay him $7 or $8 million at this point. And I think that's going to be the situation. I don't know if the Falcons are going to be willing to spring that type of money to bring back Cordero Patterson, because I think even in the Falcons case, even though he's been the best running back on the roster, they probably will envision him more as that RB2 type of role and being more of a true third down back in that regard, and try to bring in probably a younger running back with fresher legs in the draft to sort of share the workload with him and potentially to overtake him by years in 2022 as the RB1. So I think, Patterson is going to be a priority re-signing for the Falcons, but I think it's
Okay.
going to boil down to money. If Patterson looking to cash out because he's going to be 31 next year and saying, look, I only have a few more opportunities to get a big contract, then, it's going to be harder for the Falcons to bring him back. But he's said all the right things. He said he's loved playing here in Atlanta. He says he wants to be a Falcon. So that's giving us some hope that maybe we can get a little bit of a hometown discount, so to speak,
Yeah.
in free agency. But right now, it's kind of a toss-up for me. But I certainly think the Falcons will definitely make it a priority to try to bring him back. But whether or not they can afford it is the question.
It would be nice to see him stay there, and you get a returning Cordero Patterson with a second-year Kyle Pitts and a hopefully returning Calvin Ridley, and suddenly you've got three really interesting weapons on an offense to go forward with. So, for Falcons fans and also for you, I think it would be cool if he stayed there so you guys could continue to utilize him down there. Switching gears, move towards this defense. 31st in defensive DVOA, 29th against the pass, 24th against the run. They have not been great in the red zone as well. 29th in red zone DVOA in terms of defense, 27th in the red zone against the pass, 31st against the rush. They have been beaten in a variety of ways and had some bad games, but they've got somebody who I've been banging the drum for all year in Mr. AJ Terrell. I just think he's really phenomenal and a really good corner. I put a tweet out earlier, per PFF, he's allowing a reception percentage of 42.9%. For reference, Jalen Ramsey, reception percentage 65.4, Darius Slay 59.4, Bills Tre'Davious White 53.4, Patriots JC Jackson 51.1. AJ Terrell is having a stud elite year out there in Atlanta. Let's talk about him. How good has he been? And also, given the scheme that Atlanta plays, do you expect him to travel with Stephon Diggs this week, or not, based on how he fits in this Atlanta defense?
Yeah, I think the PFF grades and ratings basically put AJ Terrell pretty much in like the top 3 in pretty much every category for a
Literally,
cornerback this year.
literally.
Yeah, so, that was a big topic of discussion last week where it's like, he clearly got snubbed from the Pro Bowl. He's been one of the best corners in the league this year.
I don't get
And
it.
at least if you buy into PFF grades and whatnot, he has been the best cornerback in the league this year. So he's been outstanding. They haven't asked him to travel that much really at all this
Okay.
season. An occasional play here or there, as Dean Pease likes to work his magic with his disguise coverages, and they'll move him to one side of the field and make it look like they're traveling. And then they'll break out into like a cover 2 zone or something like that. So you'll see a little bit of that. But, one does wonder a little bit, given the injuries that the Falcons have in the secondary. Fabian Moreau missed practice on Wednesday with a rib injury, so his status this weekend is up for grabs. He's the starter opposite AJ Terrell at that outside cornerback spot. Their nickel cornerback situation has basically been a revolving door. Isaiah Oliver got injured in week 4 and out for the season with a knee injury. They've been basically replacing him with a trio of rookie draft picks. Richie Grant, their second round safety, their 4th round corner in Darren Hall, and their 5th round corner in Avery Williams. It started out with Avery Williams getting the reps. He's their kickoff and or backup kickoff behind Patterson and punt returner. And he kind of struggled in that role, and then they kind of went to Richie Grant, and he's been up and down a little bit, but now he's on the COVID reserve list, so his status is probably, I guess technically he went on Monday or Tuesday, so I guess with the new CDC guidelines and whatnot, he might be able to get cleared by Saturday before Sunday, but probably not. And so that kind of leaves Darren Hall, who's been up and down, has had some good things, has had some bad things going for him. And, the Cole Beasley matchup is not one that I think is particularly favorable for Darren Hall. It wouldn't be favorable for any of the Falcons nickel cornerbacks. So one does wonder if the Falcons just kind of say, screw it. Like, let's have AJ Terrell travel. At least we can take out Stephon Diggs out of the situation. But that has not been a way that Dean Pease, the Falcons defensive coordinator, has played this year. And based off of what Dean Pease has talked about, doesn't seem like he's particularly interested in doing that. So I would not expect it to happen. But, maybe the Falcons surprise you and throw a curveball and say, what do we have to lose? Let's see what AJ Terrell can do against Stephon Diggs this week and have him travel there.
Ooh, I'm interested to see if it happens, because I put out the message with those reception percentage stats earlier, and I said AJ Terrell is the best corner that you're not paying attention to in the NFL. I feel like genuinely he's had such a good year. I liked him at Clemson, and I feel like the Falcons got a lot of flack when they took him in the first round when they did, because people thought it was too high and it was a reach. And he's paying dividends for that return on investment this year. And yeah, it gets snubbed from the Pro Bowl. Bills fans know all about that with Josh Allen and don't put too much stock in it. But yeah, he's really having a phenomenal year. Let's move up front to the Falcons D line. I mentioned the Bills O line. It's been a weakness for this team. So many problems for this Bills offensively all start with the offensive line. The offensive line is patient zero, seemingly, for like every single problem that starts for this Bills offense. What does the Falcons front and defensive line in particular look like going up against this Bills O-line? Do you think the Falcons front is a favorable matchup heading into this game based on how they played this year?
Well, I think the story of the Falcons offense and their offensive line is the same story, but just dialed up to 11. Their offensive line is even more problematic.
So we're the same.
Yeah. So, I think the Falcons have the league's worst pass rush. It's basically pretty much every metric tells you that they have the worst pass rush. If you can find a metric that says they have only the second worst pass rush in the NFL, I'll be like, yeah, let's use that now. And let's ignore every other instance of that. So it's one of those things where the Falcons have the capacity to do damage to this Bills offensive line, particularly with Grady Jarrett, who's by far their best pass rusher on the interior. I know with the Ike Butker injury or whatever the case may be, that could be something that the Falcons could exploit. But basically what NFL teams have done all season long is basically double Grady Jarrett in passing situations and dared somebody else on the Falcons front to beat them. And that hasn't been the guy. Dante Fowler's had his moments. He's made a couple of plays with some sack strips here or there throughout the season, but outside of that play here and now, every now and then, he's not been a guy that's consistently showing up and creating pressure for them. And pretty much everybody else, there's not a whole lot to write home as far as anybody who's a potent pass rusher. And now they're down a couple of guys due to COVID and whatnot along that defensive front. So it's one of those things that basically, if Buffalo's strategy is like, we'll just double Grady Jarrett and we'll make Dante Fowler beat us and take over this game, which he hasn't done in like 3 years, then that's probably going to be a winning strategy. So I probably wouldn't lose too much sleep worrying about the Falcons being the team that is able to exploit that weakness on the Bills offensive line.
Last question for you. Based on what the Falcons have going on up front, based on how good AJ Terrell is, and then their overall coverage schemes, they have run 119 cover one snaps, which is the 9th most. They've run 130 in cover two, zone cover two, which is the 2nd most cover two snaps for any defense. And then they've got 124 snaps in cover three. So they like to go towards those single high looks. How would you attack this Falcons defense, given the way they play coverage on the back end, given how they've struggled up front? How do you attack them if you're the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've talked about a lot on Locked on Falcons is like, it seems like every time the Falcons play cover two, they give up a big play. And the whole point of playing cover two is not to give up big plays. And that was something that DPs spoke about.
And that's also not good considering they run so much of it.
Yeah. And so it's one of those things where they've shifted in the second half of the season a little bit more to their man coverage. And that's been a little bit more effective for them, at least in limiting the big plays. And it allows them to dial up a little bit more pressure in order to affect the quarterback, because they're just not a team that can get pressure with a standard 4-man rush, as I just discussed. It's one of those things where I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, you're sitting pretty, because you have the playmakers at the receiver position that the Falcons really don't have. Like, AJ Terrell can probably man up whoever he lines up against. But given what I talked about with the injuries and what's going on in the rest of that secondary, the Falcons don't really have the horses to really man up that team. So they're probably going to sit back and play a lot of zone. You couple that with Josh Allen's ability to run. They want to keep eyes on him. The Falcons have really struggled with mobile quarterbacks this season in containing those guys. So they're probably going to wind up playing a lot of zone and cover two. And as so many teams have done, they've been able to attack that vertical seam with tight ends and with slot receivers. So if the Bills can, get Dawson Knox going and, other guys, over the middle of the field, that will be a great way to really exploit this Falcons defense and what I expect to be their game plan on Sunday.
Aaron, you have been phenomenal as I had hoped for and anticipated. So my expectations were high for you, and you met those expectations. So that was really good.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for coming by. And I always like to tell everyone, especially everybody who watches the show, it's always good to follow people of other teams, because one, you get to stay up on your knowledge of all the other opponents and everybody that exists in the league, but especially follow people who know football and know the game, and you are one of those people. So tell everyone in this episode here where they can find you, what you do, likes, dislikes, long walks on the beach, what kind of sign are you, all that kind of stuff.
I appreciate that. People can follow me on Twitter at FalcFans. If you want snarky Falcons tweets, then that's
you do have very snarky Falcons tweets. They are very good.
So that's what I specialize in. In addition to that, I'm on Locked On Falcons every day I'm supposed to be on it for 30 minutes, but I tend to be long-winded, as I'm sure your listeners know. Yep. For 45 minutes each and every day, Monday through Friday, so they can check out daily stuff with the Falcons. Occasionally I put up written content over at the Falcoholic. I'm probably due for a column this week because I've taken the last couple of weeks off. So I'll probably have something up there at thefalcoholic.com, the SB Nation website for the Atlanta Falcons. So that's where people can find me. If they want my likes and dislikes, I'm a big fan of buffalo wings.
Oh, nice.
I don't really mess with boneless wings though. They got to be bone in.
Okay.
But that's one thing that I respect from Buffalo. I got the chance to visit a friend in Buffalo many years ago.
Okay.
When I was in college, and definitely enjoyed the one trip I've taken to Buffalo. So would love to go back, but probably not going to be this weekend.
My wife wants to take a trip to Atlanta because there's an amazing aquarium there, I guess, and then the Coca-Cola factory, and I think a Clorox factory, which I think she's also about, I think exists there. So I have to get down to Atlanta at some point. But that's awesome that you've been to Buffalo and you like wings. And it's actually, I'll follow up on that. I'm not particular boneless or bone in. How come you prefer bone in so much?
I feel like boneless wings are just chicken nuggets.
Yeah, well, yeah, they basically are.
Like, it's fine. Like, and if they were just called like spicy nuggets, I would be like, oh, spicy nuggets. Let's get some spicy nuggets. But when you throw wings into the equation,
Gotcha.
it's offensive to my senses. Whereas it's not a wing, it's a nugget. So,
and the expectation isn't meeting what the reality is. It's all coming full circle. I think that's actually a really fair point, because it's not a boneless wing. It's just a ball of chicken. Basically, there's no wing element to it. Well done. That's what I'm going to use as the promo for this episode. I'm not going to show anything about scheme and strategy. We're just going to be like, all we did was talk about wings. You have been phenomenal again, as I mentioned. Thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate you. And I have your Twitter handle up there at the bottom. So everybody who's watching, listening, whatever, go check out Aaron on Twitter and read his work and listen to Locked On Falcons. And yeah, I appreciate you, man. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. Have a good one. What an absolutely tremendous guest we had here with Mr. Aaron Freeman that continues in this string of really solid guests. Yeah, as Jason says right there, Jason throws it up and says, great guest. Thanks. Yeah, Aaron was awesome. He made my job very easy for this week. What the prep work looks like for me, a little peek behind the curtain, I always start to look for guests as this week is starting to end, I'll start looking for a Jets guest as we move forward towards the end of this week. And sometimes I have to do more work in terms of finding a guest, and sometimes I have to do less. And Aaron came highly recommended, and I had known of his work. And yeah, it's awesome to just have somebody be able to fit in like that. And Aaron was great. And legitimately, I say it every week, and I don't just say it just because of having a guest on. I think it's very important for everyone to always stay up on all the teams that exist in the NFL. So you're well informed and know. Awesome comment from Thomas there saying home run guest. Yeah, Aaron was phenomenal. I think it's great to always stay up on all teams, so that way you kind of know what to expect coming in every week. And Aaron is a go-to guy for the Falcons, really knowledgeable, really smart, knows the game, and is able to articulate it really well and make everything understandable. And that's really one of the things I really loved about him and why I wanted to have him on. And Yeah, so he was awesome. And we're going to continue talking about this Bills-Falcons matchup a little bit as we ride out on the back half of this episode. As always, any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you guys have. I know there's a lot to talk about with how the COVID, restrictions have changed recently. The Bills win against the Patriots. Anything you got, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, feel free to throw them into the chat. I'll try to get to everything as I can. As always, super chats will always be brought up right away and read. And they also always catch my eye because of the color. So that's a good way to do that as well. But before I get to that, you know what time it is. Sponsor of this show, One Pie Pizza. You see it in the, I'm so close. At least I got the side right this time. I'm really bad at this every week. One Pie Pizza. You see the logo up there. And you may have asked yourself, Anthony, how come that logo's up there? How come there's a thing that says One Pie Pizza? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this show, as every episode of Disguise Coverage is sponsored by One Pie Pizza. You see the Twitter handle there at the bottom of the screen, at One Pie Pizza, WNY. Delicious sweet sauce pie, delicious homemade blue cheese. They have a limited menu because they believe in doing one thing and doing that one thing right, and that is making great pizza. They are tremendous people. They had a knockout cancer drive in October. They were doing Toys for Tots and different things over the holidays. They are legitimately and genuinely a really good family atmosphere and a really good group of people that run this company. And they make amazing pizza. So go out, get yourself some. I've loved seeing the testimonials that have come from different episodes over the last several weeks where people have said that, they've come up to Buffalo for a game and they've tried One Pie Pizza. It's genuinely delicious and amazing. So go out and try some. I always get the same thing every time. I literally just get cheese and pepperoni pizza. I get as much of the blue cheese as I can because the homemade blue cheese is so good. The pizza is almost just a vehicle to get the homemade blue cheese into my body and system, but they're both phenomenal and the people are great. So go out, get yourself some One Pie Pizza, do yourself a favor, and let's keep talking about some Bills-Falcons matchup. I mentioned it earlier in this episode with some of the numbers there. But the Falcons are bad when it comes to DVOA, and Aaron's point was great, right? So Aaron said how, really interesting question here from George. George said, what do you want to see at the second wide receiver spot in the offseason? I want to see someone with speed. I think Gabriel Davis is locked in. I like the role he has, but I think we need to get that versatility piece. I think what we saw Isaiah McKenzie do against the Patriots this past week was a hugely important thing, right? I love Cole Beasley, and I think he's still arguably the best slot receiver in the NFL. His ability to just work the short and intermediate is phenomenal. But Isaiah McKenzie's ability to get vertical and stretch defenses more up the field with his pace and his speed and his burst and long speed to a degree as well, I think that's vastly important for this offense. This Bills offense as a whole doesn't have a lot of long speed. Gabriel Davis is deceptively fast, but he's not a burner. Stephon Diggs is quicker than he is fast. He's not like a straight downfield burner. Beasley is not. Manny Sands can still get vertical. I think he surprised a lot of people, but I don't know if he's coming back next year. So I think Davis, and I guess kind of rephrase as well, I think Gabriel Davis is the wide receiver 2 coming in next year, right? And if Beasley stays, that's fine. I would like Cole Beasley to stay. If he's healthy, he's still so killer in that part of the field. But I would like some sort of speed element in this offense, whether that's Isaiah McKenzie, whether that's a draft pick or a free agent signing. I think this offense needs speed. They need somebody to consistently stretch the field vertically and be able to win with just athleticism and win with more than just technicality. So that's what I would like to see, I guess, from the second wide receiver spot. Although I think Diggs is number 1, and then wide receiver 2 is either Davis or Beasley, and if they both stay, then it's one of them. If one of them goes, they're automatically or if Beasley goes, Davis is automatically number 2. But I just want to see more speed injected into the wide receiver grouping, more long speed injected into the wide receiver grouping and into the running back backfield as well. What else do we got? Comment here from Michael. I love Michael. He's phenomenal. Michael says, hey, Ant, love the breakdown with Eric. Eric apologized in the Slack about the length, but it still could have been longer. I just want to do that to plug the Film Room episode that Mr. Eric Turner and I did last night. I Michael, you can probably tell me offhand. I don't remember how long it was. I think it was like over an hour and a half. But we broke down a lot of the Bills' offensive performance against the Patriots this past weekend and everything the Patriots threw at the Bills' offense, and in particular at Josh Allen, and why what Josh Allen did and why what this Bills' offense did is arguably Josh Allen's greatest performance to date in his career. So that is 1,000% a must watch after this episode of Disguise coverage, of course. But I appreciate you enjoying that, Michael. And yeah, honestly, it could have been longer. When we finished, we were like, we literally could have just done every play and just gone for like 3-4 hours. But really appreciate the feedback and knowing that you enjoyed that. Comment here from Eric. Would like to see McKenzie sent deep a few times. A 4.4 40 should get him past most DBs. I never know I always forget what McKenzie's 40 time is off the top of my head. And don't get 40 times can also be a little misleading. Like Gabriel Davis runs a 40 in the 4.5s, but he is consistently able to get vertical. So don't get too enamored with the 40s. But yes, I agree. I think the Bills need long speed in this offense. They've been missing it since John Brown got hurt last year. That ability to stretch the field and open up these short and intermediate areas for Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis and Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox. Having somebody to do that, I think, is vital, especially as we continue to see teams try to play over the top and play more zone against the Bills and try to keep everything in front of them. It's easier to create space underneath if you've got somebody who can take the top off the defense. Or if you're a team like the Patriots and you want to go single high coverages, whether it's man in cover 1 or zone in cover 3, that's fine. Because then you have somebody like Isaiah McKenzie who can win with that speed on those deep over routes, which we broke down in the film room last night and saw time and time again. Isaiah McKenzie just winning on these deep overs in the second half, whether in man coverage against Miles Bryant or in zone coverage. That speed is a very, very important thing for this offense. So we need to see it continuously injected into this offense. I'm going to mute myself for a minute and cough and take a drink of water. So give me a quick sec. Oh, apologies for that bit of silence. Again, I have to do that for the audio only. I don't want people to just hear silence and be like, oh my goodness, what happened? I'm going through any more comments. Yeah, I see John's comment that I think Cole is gone. He might be. Oh, Michael got back to me. I knew you would. Around an hour and 30. So 1 hour, 30 minutes is how long the film room went last night. And yeah, we probably could have gone longer. But there were so many plays to break down and diagram in terms of why it worked from a scheme and structure and X's and O's perspective, and also plays that we just wanted to highlight for just because of how impressive Josh Allen was, which he genuinely was. And Devin throwing some more positive vibes about the film room. Devin says, yes, the film room episode was great. I appreciate you, Devin. Thank you so much. Comment here from Jay. You got to keep Cole. He's a game changer. He's one of the best route runners. 1,000%. He is one of the best route runners. I want Cole Beasley to stay. I think he's a tremendous asset for Josh. I think he's a security blanket. I agree. I think he's one of the best route runners in football. I think he's one of the best slot receivers. His ability to leverage coverage and find the openings in zone and be able to win against man are tremendous. He's been banged up this year, and I think you see the impact on the Bills' offense when Cole Beasley is not healthy. We saw towards the back end of last year when he got hurt, this offense did not look the same. Granted, Stephon Diggs was also hurt, as was John Brown, but a healthy Cole Beasley is tremendously important to this Bills team. And it's not easy to replicate a Cole Beasley because of how good he is and at the level that he plays. Oh, Steven said, Ant, where's your hat? I'm not wearing a hat tonight. I decided to go without a hat. I don't know if you're asking because I look bad or because I look fantastic, but either way, yeah, I didn't go with a hat. I didn't go with a hat last night in the film room either. I don't know. Just wasn't feeling it. Sometimes I don't feel it. I do wear hats a lot, but just wasn't feeling it these past couple nights, but I appreciate you recognizing it. Oh, awesome question for Steven. Combine speed versus game speed. And then for reference, Josh Allen ran a 4.76 40. Awesome. There is a difference between combine speed and game speed. Very true. Very true. I see the questions coming through about Marquez Stevenson. Yeah. I mean, in theory, I would love for him to be kind of an heir apparent and legitimate piece to this offense. I just don't know if he will. I think him being inserted into this offense to play a role in the offense and not special teams, I think it's more of hope than it is predicting with accuracy based on what we've already seen. Going into it, I would like Stevenson to be a piece of the offense next year. But if I had to put my eggs in a basket, I would prefer to go with a free agent signing in that regard. If that was the option, if the option is Marquez Stevenson or someone in free agency or a day 1 or day 2 draft pick at wide receiver, I would go with the day 1, day 2 or free agency option just because I feel like there's more certainty to that. Oh, got to pull this out from Thomas. Super Chat 1. Thank you so much for the donation. I greatly appreciate it. It goes a long way and means more than you could possibly know. And awesome comment as well. Thomas says, Miles Bryant karma from the Patriots win bowl. Little Dirty's revenge. So yes, Miles Bryant was the one who peeled off his man coverage to knock the pass down on the last play of the game for the Bills offense on Monday night when they lost to the Patriots in game 1. So yeah, so now he got his karma and a little revenge because he got cooked time and time again against the Bills and Isaiah McKenzie, which honestly is unfortunate for him. He was not built to cover Isaiah McKenzie like that, and the Pats did not adjust in that regard in the second half, and McKenzie won time and time again. So awesome comment, Thomas. Way to bring it full circle and tie it back to what Bryant did on Monday night. And also thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you. There's a comment I wanted to go to. Where is it? Before we get, I'm going to dive into the Bills-Falcons matchup in a minute, but this is a great question I had to get to it. Jason says, Ant, how long are you going to keep your big Xmas tree up? So this big one that I love, my wife did a great job finding this one and decorating as well. My wife decorated this. This big guy is staying up through January. The colors are going to change a little bit. They will move from Christmas colors to more of wintry type of colors. So that one's going to stay up through January, then that'll go away. And then the smaller tree will then move back over to there. And I will start decorating it probably in a lot of red for Valentine's Day for February, a lot of green for St. Patrick's Day, and maintain all the, a lot of pastels for Easter. So that's the plan as we go forward. I really appreciate you asking it. The tree means a lot to me. So thank you. Question here from Devin. Do you think Singletary's better performance was mostly attributable to the O-line playing better? Yes, to a degree, because you can't have a good running game without a good offensive line. I think he has shown more decisiveness and burst in his runs the last several weeks, but I think a lot of it is tied to the scheme the Bills have gone with. I think they've gone to more pin pulls and more gap runs to take advantage of the athleticism of several of the guys up front, like Mitch Morse and Spencer Brown. Mitch Morse is one of the best pin and pull centers in all of football, and Spencer Brown, we all know about his athleticism. So I think a lot of it is tied to the scheme change that the Bills have done. So I think as the Bills have taken advantage of their O-line strengths the last several weeks, Singletary has looked better. But a lot of it has to do with what Devin has done. But yes, I think, the O-line playing better, it plays a significant hand in that role. Where else? Oh, really good question. And I'm going to use this one to start talking Bills Falcons here as we've gone off the rails a little bit. Steven's question is, Ant, are we looking at more deep crossing routes if the Falcons can't get pressure? So let me go to my notes here. The Atlanta Falcons defense. So deep crossers, especially the ones that worked against the Patriots, those work really well against single high defenses. So when I say single high, just for those who don't know, that's a defense with just one single safety in the middle. So single high is a safety in the middle. Two high is two safeties in the back, right? So single high coverages are cover one, where you have man coverage and then a single high safety up top patrolling everything deep by himself. He's lined up in the middle. And then another single high coverage is cover three, which zone coverage for that one, you can run it in a variety of ways, but the most standard shell and way for it is a corner takes a deep third, the other corner takes a deep third, and then you again have a single high safety who patrols the middle third, right? Deep crossers like the ones the Bills ran against the Patriots work really well against single high defenses. It's hard for corners to travel that far across the field in man coverage or if you're in a zone like a cover 3, you can get that deep crosser to slip in behind somebody if he can work his way all the way across the field, right? The Patriots, they use a lot of single high coverage. They did in the Monday night game against the Bills. They did again this past Sunday. And whether it was man in cover 1 or zone in cover 3, McKenzie ate it up. So the Falcons, I say all that to say this, the Falcons, in terms of single high coverages, they run single high coverages 47% of the time. And as I mentioned, they are ninth. They have the ninth most cover 1 snaps at 119. They have 124 cover 3 snaps, as Aaron mentioned earlier in this episode. They've run a lot more man these last several weeks, in this last month. And so I think you're going to see a decent amount of single high looks from Atlanta. That being said, teams this year have wanted to play the Bills with more 2 high looks and with more zone, because last year the Bills killed single high and the Bills killed zone coverage. So what the Pats did was trying to play more to their strengths than it was playing to how teams have slowed down the Bills, and the Bills ate that. So maybe the Falcons stay in more 2 high looks because they try to limit the Bills. But again, I feel like I needed to give a very comprehensive answer because there's a lot to answer that question, because it's not just straightforward to Steven's question there. But yes, I think if the Falcons stay true to who they are, which is playing a decent amount of single high looks, you will see those crossers, because those crossers beat that type of coverage on defense. Combined with the fact that if the Falcons can't get pressure, yeah, the Bills will go play action and to just add a little wrinkle to take advantage, suck in those second level defenders, and then eat off of those crossers all day. So I think it's more, we're looking at more deep crossing routes if the Falcons play single high coverage than it is more deep crossing routes if the Falcons can't get pressure. But if they can't get pressure, that also helps. But really good question. I'm going to answer these last 2 questions. I'm going to keep answering questions. But I'm going to start to get to the breakdown here. This question is, do you think that McKenzie is better than Cole Beasley in the slot? No. I think Cole Beasley is a better slot receiver than Isaiah McKenzie. I love the dynamic that Isaiah McKenzie adds, because his speed and athleticism and burst and shiftiness is something that I think this offense needs, because it doesn't really have it. But Cole Beasley is still one of the best slot receivers in the entire NFL. So no, I don't think McKenzie's better than Beasley in the slot. And I don't think that's a slight against Isaiah McKenzie, because I don't really know who I would name. That's the list of people that I would name that are better than Cole Beasley in the slot is literally like a handful of people. Question from Bill: do you think Bates should start at guard? If Feliciano can't go, yes, I'm starting Ryan Bates. If Feliciano is good, he was activated off the COVID list. If he's ready and he can play, I'd probably lean Feliciano, but I'm comfortable with Ryan Bates. I think Bates versus Feliciano is kind of like 6 of one, half a dozen of another. So I don't think it's too crazy. Oh, good comment here from Mr. Diggs. McKenzie and Beasley are different. McKenzie is faster with speed, and Cole is better at route running. Yeah, I think McKenzie's route running has gotten better, which he himself has spoken about, playing alongside Cole Beasley and learning from him. He's gotten better in his route running. So McKenzie's route running has improved a decent amount. Awesome. I'm seeing that graphic from you, Mr. Diggs. Is that Josh Allen leading like an army of White Walkers from Game of Thrones? If it is, that graphic is fantastic. It just caught my eye. Yeah, McKenzie and Cole Beasley are different. So I think that's a huge part in talking about it too, in terms of who's better in the slot, this and that. If I had to pick one, I would pick Cole Beasley, but I think what McKenzie brings is vastly important for this offense. So diving into this Bills-Falcons matchup, I talked about what the Falcons like to do on defense and their coverages. So single high coverage is 47% of the time, and you're looking at cover 1, 119 snaps, which is the 9th most in the NFL, 124 cover 3 snaps. They give a 3-man rush 14% of the time, which is the 7th most in the league. They only blitz 20% of the time, which is 23rd. So you're not going to see a lot of blitzing. You're going to see predominantly a 4-man rush, sometimes a 3-man rush. And as Aaron mentioned, they haven't gotten a lot of pressure. Grady Jarrett up front for Atlanta is still a stud, but he hasn't been really getting pressure this year. And as Aaron mentioned, he's seeing a lot of double teams, and teams when playing the Falcons have just been like, okay, we're not going to let this guy beat us up front. Someone else try and beat us. And they haven't. And to tie some more things together for this Falcons defense, they, as I mentioned earlier, 31st in defensive DVOA, 29th against the pass, 24th against the rush, 30th in first half DVOA defense, 30th in second half DVOA defense, 29th in the red zone, 27th against the pass in the red zone, 31st against the rush in the red zone. I see a super chat. This is hilarious from Thomas. My question, do you and Bill Belichick have the same New Year's resolutions? One, again, thank you so much for the super chat and the donation, Thomas. Two, well done. For those of you who don't know, Bill Belichick was asked post-game Sunday against the Bills by a reporter, by a very brave reporter, what his New Year's resolutions were for this upcoming year. And he didn't answer it too bad or too snarky. He was just kind of like, we're going to have to wait till next week in typical Bill Belichick form and fashion. Yeah, Thomas, we do have the same New Year's resolutions. You will have to wait. I'm also not a big New Year's resolution guy. I never really have been. But that was well done. That brought a smile to my face. Well done, Thomas. I appreciate you so much for donating again twice in this episode. Thank you so much. And your first question was awesome. And this one was hilarious. Well done. I appreciate you. Yeah, as Thomas says, it was the funniest thing ever. Yeah, I couldn't believe someone had the guts to ask that question to Bill Belichick. So massive props to that reporter. She did a great job. And continuing on this defense, this one is interesting, right? So I mentioned this earlier in the show, and I just want to reiterate it. So two metrics that I really like to look towards when it comes to how an offensive line is doing and how a defense is doing. There's two situational pieces. So there's stuff percentage, which is the amount of runs that the running back is tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage. So that's stuff percentage, right? So you think of that from an offense perspective, but then on the defensive side, the flip side there, you're looking at it from the percentage of like, okay, how many times do you tackle the running back at or behind the line of scrimmage, right? This Falcons defense, they're 29th in stuff percentage. So they've only tackled running backs at or behind the line of scrimmage on 12% of snaps. For reference, Tampa Bay is first at 25%. So they are 13 percentage points lower than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, they're 29th, but the last place team is at 11%. So they're basically last. They're not good in stuff percentage at all and making tackles at or behind the line of scrimmage. Another metric, as I take another drink of water. Pardon me. Thank you very much. Another one that I like to go at is power success. So power success is the percentage of runs on third or fourth down, 2 yards or less to go, that achieved a first down or a touchdown. This also includes runs on first and goal or second and goal from the 2-yard line or closer. Right? So if you're looking at it from a defensive perspective, you're thinking how many runs on third and fourth down, 2 yards or less to go, do you allow to achieve a first down or a touchdown, right? The Falcons defense is last in that regard. 82% of the time on third and fourth down, 2 yards or less to go, a team has achieved a first down or a touchdown running against this Falcons defense. That's very bad. For reference, the Jaguars are first in the league at 55%. So the Falcons are way down there. Also, for reference, there's only 2 teams that have allowed a success rate above 75%. One of them is the Falcons. So again, very bad. And also for reference, the Bills are 28th at 73%, which makes sense. We've seen the Bills give up first downs and touchdowns on third and 2 or fourth and 2 or less in terms of distance on those downs. But the difference is the Bills, from a stuff percentage, they make plays. They are 4th in stuff percentage defensively at 22%. So something we come to expect with the Bills defense, where they make plays in the backfield, they shoot gaps and they tackle guys at the line of scrimmage or behind. But because they are a smaller one gap penetrating type defense, they will get beat against bigger physical game plans and lines, and give up some big runs at times when they get out gapped. But the Falcons defense holistically, not good. As Aaron mentioned, the matchup is not great. They're banged up in the secondary. They're not generating pressure up front with their front at all. And the type of coverages they play will lend itself to helping what the Bills do on offense. I'm very interested to see how AJ Terrell does in this game. As I said, he's one of my favorite players in the league this year. That is, Steven says, do the Falcons do anything good on defense? Let AJ Terrell make plays is something they do good on defense. He's really a stud. And if he travels, as Aaron said, he hasn't traveled a lot, but the Falcons have played more man over these last several weeks and this last month. So if they continue with that and they move Terrell with Diggs wherever he goes, that's going to be a really, 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 really fun matchup to watch, because Diggs is a stud and AJ Terrell is a budding stud, potentially elite corner in this NFL. I don't want to call someone elite because they've had one great year, but Terrell is really fun to watch. So he's someone to watch out for. And then with the Bills' offensive line versus the Falcons' defensive line and the front as a whole, Grady Jarrett is still a stud, but teams have been double teaming him, like Aaron said. So as long as you don't let Grady Jarrett beat you, you should be fine up front. But the Bills have shown that they have been susceptible to teams that have studs or good players up front being able to. Thank you. My wife brought me tea. She's fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. The Bills have shown a susceptibility to studs and playmakers up front. And that's something I'm still going to be concerned about. Even though the Falcons really only have one up front, they have one horse up front with Grady Jarrett, and he's still very good. I'm nervous anytime the Bills play someone who's elite up front, because the Bills have shown that they've been susceptible to having games be wrecked by stud players up front. And usually not just one. It's usually a team that has multiple good pieces up front. But I am a little bit worried to see what Grady Jarrett potentially can do. But this Falcons defense, as we just talked about, a lot of metrics where they're very subpar. They're towards the bottom of the NFL in almost every metric, whether it's advanced and efficiency based or just raw statistical metrics. So this is an advantage for the Buffalo Bills. I expect the Bills to continue to ride hot offensively and take advantage of this Falcons defense and their lack of success that they've had on the back end and in the front. Pivoting towards the other side, Bills defense versus Falcons offense. I'm going to go with this question here from Steven. Steven says, hey, Ant, if you get a chance, can you explain why the Bills are so much better defending zone runs as opposed to gap runs? Interesting question, Steven. I'm going to take a sip of tea. Oh, that's good. I think the Bills have been beat a bit when it comes to zone runs, but the main difference for why the Bills get gashed more and give up big plays more when it comes to gap runs is the responsibility you have on defense, right? So this can be a long answer, but I'm going to try to shorten it. But basically, when you are defending the run, it's all about filling a gap, right? So I have the A gap, you have the B gap, and everybody has a gap. Everybody has an assignment. And if something happens where you move, you have to gap exchange, right? So if I have the A gap and you have the B gap, and all of a sudden you go to the A gap, I have to go to the B gap and we have to switch, right? So that's how you defend runs at all times. And when you add in more players to a front, it's easier to gap out, right? If you've got a loaded box, say you've got 8 men in the box, it's easy to be like, okay, there's 8 gaps. We've got 8 players for every single gap. Boom, we're good, right? That's where it starts. The Bills don't really do that. The Bills go light boxes a lot. 4 down defensive linemen, Milano and Edmonds are your 2 linebackers. They're also in nickel, so they don't really have heavier personnel. So they are a nickel defense. If they have a 7th defender in the box, it's either going to be Poyer or Hyde or Taron Johnson, right? So you've got a light box. And then on top of that, when you have a light box and teams run gap against you, even if you don't have a light box and teams are just running gap, but this problem or the challenges of this are compounded when you go with a light box, you have to be so sound in your technique and you have to operate with so much gap integrity. And if you don't, it's easy to get beat. A really good example is that Damian Harris touchdown run against the Bills on Monday night and a lot of their G lead runs as well, but they run that toss and he just cuts back and houses it because Edmonds over pursues a little, Micah Hyde over pursues a little, Tyrell Dodson doesn't shrink down, and there's all of a sudden a wide hole, right? And Harris takes off and he scores. So what's more challenging with gap runs is you have to be so, and in the run in general, you have to be very gap sound. But with gap runs, right? If you are out of position and a play is going to that specific hole, it's harder to combat that and it's harder to kind of recover it a little bit. And that's also what we saw in the Colts game for the Bills, right? Ed Oliver would shoot a gap and get upfield so fast and so quick that he would take himself out of the play. And we saw it early on in the game, right? He shoots the gap. Jack Doyle traps him and just moves him out of the way. And there's all of a sudden a huge hole in the B gap because Ed Oliver vacated his spot. And if you vacate your spot or you switch to go to a different gap or you get moved out of a gap, the other players have to then cover for you and they have to run that gap exchange like we talked about in the beginning, right? You're supposed to be in the A gap, but you go to the B or you get pushed out of the A gap. I have to now cover the A gap because the A gap has an open spot. So it's hard to playing run defense is tough, right? It's not just as simple as just like, we'll just throw more men at the line of scrimmage or put more bigger bodied guys up there, right? It's a tough thing to do. You have to be sound in where you're going and why you're going there. And then at the same time, all the other defenders have to read what you're doing and you all have to understand and see the same thing at the same time and execute the same way at the same time in order to not leave a hole open, right? It's also harder to run gap runs for an offense because you have to zone runs are easier because it's easier to account for what the defense is doing and it's easier to account for the unknown. Whereas gap runs are designed to like go to a specific area. And as an offensive lineman, you are blocking a specific guy. Zone runs are more just we're going to an area. And as an offensive lineman, you're blocking a certain area. You're blocking a zone. And then the running back gets to pick and choose. Whereas this gap run is like, okay, the hole is going to be between the guard and tackle. A zone run is like the hole can be wherever the running back finds daylight and then goes for it. So it's harder to run gap runs, which is why the offenses in today's NFL are so zone heavy. Like last year's numbers, there were over 9,000 zone runs that were run and just over 3,000 gap runs. I think like 3,300 gap runs. I think it was like 9,300 to 3,200, something like that, zone to gap. So it's easier to run zone. And this is a great comment here from Michael. Michael loves trench warfare on the O lines and D lines. Michael says there's also pullers that shift/add gaps to one side. So the whole D has to account for it. And if one doesn't, it opens a hole. That's an awesome point. So if you're pulling a guard, you knew exactly where I was going with this, Michael. This is what I was talking to you next. So on those gap runs, if you're pulling a guard or you're pulling a tackle from the right side to the left side, you're removing a gap from that side where the puller's coming from, and you're adding a gap to that other side. So that's a new gap that you have to account for a defense. So there's just a lot of complications to stopping the running game in general, but especially gap runs because you're moving gaps and you're changing and you have to adjust in real time. And then you have gap exchanges on the back end from the defense. So it just adds a complicated piece. And also the gap runs that the Bills have been beat on have been against teams that are good offensive lines. The Colts, tremendous offensive line, really good running back, really good scheme. The Patriots, really good offensive line. Plus they're a big physical offensive line, as is the Colts. Colts have more speed on that offensive line. And that's part of it too, right? The Bills defense is designed to get into gaps and penetrate and get upfield. They're built for a passing NFL, right? They're designed to get penetration, be aggressive off the snap, get upfield, and make a play in the backfield or get pressure on the quarterback, right? They are not built to have guys up front that, pardon me, I had to cough. They're not built for guys to just come out, and they don't have Vita Vea on the line, right? Not that Vita Vea can't penetrate and get pressure, because he can, but they're not built to come and hit a defender and just occupy a gap and two gap and decide, okay, I can either go to this A gap or I can go to this A gap. They are built like Ed Oliver to, there's the snap, boom, get upfield right away. And when you do that, like Ed Oliver, you can take yourself out of the play on certain gap runs like we saw against the Colts. So it's a very complicated piece, but a lot of it is just based on the nature of the attack when it comes to gap runs, and how the Buffalo Bills defense is built and what their scheme and strategy is. Good times. So this Bills defense versus this Atlanta offense. I love what Aaron mentioned earlier about their offensive line. Their offensive line has been a weakness. They have struggled this year. I mentioned the power success and the stuff percentage from a defensive perspective. Now we're looking at from an offensive perspective. Again, that stuff percentage, runs that are met at or behind the line of scrimmage. They're 25th, the Falcons. They've had 19% of their runs met at or behind the line of scrimmage, and they're last in power success. Again, the percentage of runs on 3rd and 4th down, 2 yards or less that achieve a first down, 47% power success. Terrible, 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 terrible. The Bills should be able to eat on this offensive line to a decent degree. And then when it comes to the passing attack, Matt Ryan has struggled at times this year. Aaron hit it on the head with how they've used Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts has been impressive. Again, I mentioned where he's lined up, 44% in the slot, 34% out wide, 22% in line tight end. His average depth of target is 11.4. He's so hard to cover. He's going to be a really interesting one to see what the Bills do. You know, how does he get matched up with by the Bills defense, and how does he fare in the middle against Edmonds and Milano? And do the Bills bring down a safety and cover him? Does he line up out wide? How does he do if the Bills line him up out wide against Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace? I think that's a mismatch in favor of the Falcons. Bills corners, even when Tre'Davious White was healthy, have struggled against physically imposing wide receivers. Kyle Pitts is a tight end, but when he's lined up out wide, he's a physically imposing wide receiver. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, he has tremendous hands. He's a better route runner than people realize. I'm very interested to see that matchup. As long as Kyle Pitts or Cordero Patterson do not have huge days, I think this Falcons offense struggles. They've struggled to run the ball. Again, as I mentioned, they're 24th in passing DVOA, 31st in rushing DVOA. They are not a good running team. Even with Cordero Patterson having the year that he has, a lot of the runs that he's having success on are because of him making those runs successful. They run a lot of outside zone, so expect to see them attack the edges. Gregory Rousseau, Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison are going to have to be very strong in setting the edge and forcing Cordero Patterson to then have to cut back, where Milano and Edmonds and those interior defenders can penetrate gaps and make plays in the backfield. So it's going to be a game where the Bills have to be gap sound, even though the Falcons are still running zone runs, but they're going to have to be gap sound. They're going to have to be strong on the edge. They cannot let Patterson get that edge and get upfield. Got to keep him contained in the center of the field and allow your interior to beat the Falcons' interior and attack. And honestly, I think that could happen given the struggles that the Falcons' offensive line has had. Looking at some red zone numbers, the Falcons' offense isn't terrible in the red zone, but not great. They're 19th in red zone DVOA, 12th in the pass, 28th in the rush. And where is their touchdown? Their touchdown percentage, though, is bad. They are 23rd in the NFL in touchdown percentage at 55.32%. So not great. For reference, the Bills are 13th in the NFL in touchdown percentage at 60.29. So 5 percentage points higher than the Falcons offense, who, again, holistically, as Aaron said, they play well against teams that are bad. They struggle against teams that are better. A very up and down mercurial season, and they come in 7-8, but DVOA is great because it measures, how good a team is, and it measures their efficiency by comparing success on every single play to a league average based on situation and opponent. So that's how we're able to see a team that's 7-8 with that is close to 500. With that's not a terrible record, but we see how bad they are because the DVOA, because it's comparing everything based on situation and opponent. And that's why I value the hell out of DVOA, because I think it really shows what and who a team is. I want to go back to some comments. Comment here from Steven. So what you're saying is that a team that runs more gap is a more intricate run game. Yeah, I don't want that to sound like disparaging to a zone team. But yeah, I think it's harder to run gap than it is to run zone. Again, because in zone, you're just blocking an area. It's not so much accounting for this specific guy in this specific hole. You have to win in this specific way. It's very much just like everybody block this way and the running back gets to choose. That's oversimplifying it. But yes, I think gap is more intricate to run than zone. That's one of the benefits of a zone scheme is you can account for the unknown better. That's a big one, right? So if somebody comes up to the line of scrimmage or a defender blitzes late and you didn't account for him or the box changes or something like that, it doesn't throw off your scheme because you're still just blocking an area versus blocking a specific man aiming to open a specific hole. So yes, it is more intricate than a zone run scheme, but I don't want that to sound like negative and make it seem like zone is the simplest thing that anybody can do. Really good comment here from Amicus, and I wanted to bring it up. He says, yeah, but then Edmonds gets negative yards at times, so it's hit or miss. I wish he can adjust on the fly a bit better. That is Tremaine Edmonds in a nutshell this year, right? And with the Bills defense as a whole, when it comes to some things in the run, right? So again, they are fourth in stuff percentage. So the amount from a defensive perspective. So they are fourth in how many runs they have stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage, right? We see this defense, Tremaine Edmonds, especially, but this defense as a whole, we'll see them make plays in the backfield. We'll see them make tackles at the line of scrimmage. We've seen them make plays on 1st and 10 that lead to 2nd and 12, 2nd and 13, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, or 2nd and 10. But then we've also seen them give up, 7-yard runs on 1st down or 12-yard runs on 1st down. It can be hit or miss for Tremaine Edmonds and for this defense. And I think it all comes back to, again, it's hard to play run defense. It's hard to maintain run integrity and gap integrity from a defensive perspective in general, but especially when you are a smaller, lighter defense, and especially when you play with a light box. The Bills' priority is stopping the pass, right? We know this. They play with a lot of light boxes. Where are my numbers for that? The Bills' defense. Let's go. Where? That's the Atlanta offense. Hold on. Bear with me here. Yeah, the Bills throw light boxes a lot. We know that they're going to show you Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano at the linebacker positions, and they're just going to go with 4-down linemen, and they're going to rotate a lot. They do not want to show you a look pre-snap that indicates what they're going to do as well. So even when they bring another safety down and they go with single high coverage and they spin Hyde or Poyer down, sometimes, actually a decent amount of time, they're going to come from a too high look pre-snap because they don't want the offense to know what's coming. And when that happens, then you have a safety that's coming from depth, which is also another thing that's hard, right? It's easier to be gap sound and make a play as a safety when you're already around the line of scrimmage than it is when you're coming from 12 or 15 yards deep and you have to come flying up and you have to read everything that's happening in front of you, both in terms of what the offense is doing, what the running back is doing, what the line is doing, and then also reading your peers and your partners on defense and seeing who's filled what gap, where do I need to go, right? It's an all very complicated thing. I think that doesn't get, I've talked about it several times on the show. I talked about it last week with Nate Tice, who is phenomenal and such a great mind in today's NFL and in the NFL in general, not even just today's. But it's hard to play run defense. Run fits and gap integrity are hard. It is not just as simple as, well, they're going to run, stop it, or just bring an extra guy up and stop the run like that. It's hard to stop the run in today's NFL. I think the Bills do it better than teams think they do. Again, they're the second overall team in terms of defensive DVOA, second against the pass, 14th against the rush. So they're not a bad run defense at all. They've had some bad performances in terms of yards gained or yards given up, I should say. And the Colts game, I think that was the worst one. I think the Patriots one, I know what the first Patriots game, I know what the final numbers look like. I still think it was misleading. They played better than we think they did. I've mentioned it before. I think the Pats had like 8 or 9 drives in that game, and 5 of them were 3 and outs that gained 6 yards or less. The Bills defense was better in that first game against New England against the run than people think. They just got gouged for some big runs, which is going to happen given how the Bills play defense and given the opponent they're going to go against. But they're also going to make some plays in the backfield. They're also going to make some tackles for a loss, and the stuff percentage backs that up, as does the eye test when you see the plays that Tremaine Edmonds and some of the defense makes. I'm going to take another sip of tea here. and keep scrolling through for some comments as we start to wind down here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. Oh, why told me great show. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Actually, while we're here, we still got 86 people live in this episode. Please drop a like for this episode. I know it sounds corny and it sounds stupid, and I hate asking for it, but it goes a long way in terms of helping myself and the Cover One team to track and trend in front of more eyes. So you're already here. You're already watching. Drop a like, please, and thank you. It would be absolutely fantastic. What other comments? Any other comments we have? Comment here from Nathan Peter McKay, the GOAT. Is Singletary the best amongst our running backs? I'm kind of leaning towards Matt Breida. I would say overall, like as a complete package, Devin Singletary is probably the best. I would like to see more of Matt Breida because I think his speed is a factor and something that the Bills need in this offense. Amicus told me that I had some great points. I appreciate it. Charles says there's still no blue in the tree. There will be some blue. I don't know if it's going to be in this one yet or if it's going to be in that one, but you're going to get some blue. And I appreciate you holding me accountable. Sincerely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Oh, I love this comment. This is my cousin. This is a fantastic comment. Number one defense plus Juice Allen equals playoffs, baby. Woohoo. I like that. I'm referring to Josh Allen as Juice Allen from now on because my cousin said it, and I think that's fantastic. Big Funny Anthropologist said, just got here. Did I miss anything? Yep, you did. You missed a lot. See, Devin knows. Devin said his wife will fix it in February. My wife is going to fix stuff. And actually, she'll fix it before. We got some blue coming. Don't worry. Don't worry. Where are... Oh, Charles, I don't know. Charles says Breida can't hold on to the ball. The one fumble, especially the one against New England that I'm thinking of, that was, granted, the ball hit him. He should have held on to it, but that was also bad placement by Josh. I don't necessarily put that one on him. And I don't think Breida's fumbling issues are as bad as we want to make them out to be. I think it's just more that how McDermott and the team and the coaching staff value that aspect of, and they should, like, ball security is important, but I think that put him in the doghouse, and that kind of just has lingered with him from our perspective. I don't think his fumbling issues are as bad as we think they are. But it is what it is. Comment here from Nick. What's your stance on the Scottish Hammer signing? Scottish Hammer is the awesome nickname for the punter the Bills took from, I forget whose practice squad. I think it is kind of hedging your bets a little bit and making sure you got somebody who can do the job in case anything happens to Matt Hawk. But also, I think it potentially could be, despite the fact that Matt Hawk is a tremendous holder and he's had some really great punts this year, he's also been inconsistent and had some not great punts. So I think that's just kind of hedging their bets and maybe a little message to Matt Hawk of like, hey, just so you know, we can find someone else. So, do your job. What else? I think that is actually one more comment here. Comment here from Nick. Breida hasn't hit the hole like Moss and Singletary have been lately. We haven't seen a lot of Breida, but before these last several games, I still think Breida hits the hole faster and with more pace and determination than Moss or Singletary. Moss and Singletary have pitter-pattered with their feet a lot this year when it comes to making decisions and hitting the hole. Moss more than Singletary. Singletary's been better lately, but I'm not ready to say that Singletary hits the hole better than Matt Breida. I still want to see Matt Breida in this offense. I think his speed and pace is a weapon that the Bills could use because they don't have a lot of long speed in this offense. They have short speed. They've got, quick burst speed. They've got guys who are fast in a 10-yard or 20-yard increment. They don't have a lot of long speed, and Matt Breida has that in spades, and I want it, and I need it. That's funny from Michael. Michael says Moss doesn't hit holes. He hits the old lineman. Man, that's rough. Well done, Michael. I appreciate you. That's going to start to wrap it up on this episode of Disguise Coverage. We've gone for about an hour and a half. I want to give everybody time to decompress and get ready for the Cover One show with Greg and Aaron coming up at 9. I want to give a special thank you to Mr. Aaron Freeman from the Locked On Falcons podcast and from the Falcoholic for coming on to this show. If you joined this episode late, that's fine. Go back, rewatch the first 35, 36 minutes or so of this episode. I had Aaron Freeman on. He was tremendously insightful when it comes to anything and everything for the Atlanta Falcons, really set the tone and table for how this episode progressed and gave us a lot of great insight into what we can expect from this Falcons team Sunday and how they match up against this Buffalo Bills team in terms of tendency, personnel, and some individual player spotlights. So Aaron was tremendous. If you didn't see the beginning part of this episode, go back, rewatch it, give him a follow on Twitter, and check out the Locked On Falcons podcast. He is a very great resource for anything and everything Atlanta Falcons and for just general football stuff in general, which is always how I like to do things. I like to bring on people who know the team that we're playing, but also who are just good football minds, right? Because that makes the conversation better. And I think it's the best way to create content and make everything consumable for you guys. Bigfoot Anthropologist says, I'll rerun it. I like your show. Thanks, man. I like that you like my show. I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you so much. Michael reciprocates my toodles by saying toodles, Ant. I appreciate you. This has been a really fun episode, as always. So I wanted to give a special thanks to Mr. Aaron Freeman, who is the guest on tonight's show. But I also want to give a special thank you to everybody who rode with me live on this episode. The chat, as always, has been engaging and fun. And I say it all the time when we have episodes like this where the chat just starts blowing up and we have a lot of back and forth. I always just want to do an episode that is just chat-based where we go for like an hour and a half or 2 hours and just have questions and a good back and forth. So thank you so much for riding with me live on this episode. Thank you very much to Thomas for the multiple super chats and the donations there. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who gave insightful comments, questions, thoughts, feedback, anything like that. I say it all the time that I would be nothing without all you guys who ride with me, whether it's live or with the recorded stuff that drops. So thank you so much for any and every ounce of support that you guys give. So thank you to everybody who rode with me live. If you're watching this later or listening to this later on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, thank you very much for your listen. Thank you very much for your download, your view, anything and everything. Thank you so much. Please drop a like on this video. I know it's corny, but please do. It goes a long way towards helping myself and the entire team. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. Please, please, please. That helps a lot as well. And subscribe to Cover One. Notifications and alerts on if possible. That would be awesome. Again, it may seem small to you guys, but it does a lot for us. And thank you very much to all you guys. I appreciate you. We got a big game this weekend. And I say that because we cannot look past any opponent. Everybody thought that we had another bye month coming out of the bye week and laughed about Jacksonville and the Jets and everybody like that. And the Bills lost to Jacksonville. So no team ever can be taken lightly. Any Given Sunday is not just a phenomenal football movie. It is extremely apropos to how every week should be treated when you are in the NFL. Falcons got some good pieces. They've had some good moments, but they are holistically not a great team. This should be a team the Bills should be able to continue their momentum against based on what the Falcons do well and based on what they struggle against and how that matches up with this Buffalo Bills team. We should see a solid Bills performance this week, but the Falcons cannot be overlooked. That's why this game is a big game. Control your own destiny. Beat Atlanta. Beat the Jets. Go into the playoffs as the champions of the AFC East for the second year in a row. Host a playoff game. And we see what happens. I see a lot of really great comments coming through. I appreciate everybody. Bring up my cousin's comment again. Who said, solid show, cuz. Catch you on the flip side. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, buddy. And this is a really cool comment from Amicus who says, Ant, your precise insight and knowledge of X's and O's is refreshing. Great job as always. I really appreciate that. Thanks. I don't like to pull up positive things for myself because I feel like it's corny, but that one really hit me in the feels. So I appreciate that. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the game this upcoming Sunday. Enjoy New Year. Merry Christmas to anybody who I didn't see last week. Happy New Year to those of you who will be, engaging in some New Year festivities towards the end of this week. Be safe. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe, are doing well. Be kind to one another. Take care regularly, and especially as we're celebrating the new year. Good luck in the new year. I appreciate you guys. I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for being here, watching live, watching later, listening later, whatever have you. Drop a like. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much. And as always, go Bills.